What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. I am your host, Emma Lingan. I am joined today by Michael Augello and Diandra Loux of the Hockey News. We are coming at you to talk about all of the latest and greatest storylines from around the NHL in bite-sized portions. We've got the Panthers, the Senators, the Lightning, the Canucks, all kinds of teams with lots of noteworthy stories to talk about this week. So going to get to all of that in just a moment. But of course, before we do, want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right. Well, I mentioned we've got lots to talk about today. Of course, we have Diandra here. So, going to start off with the Tampa Bay Lightning because, my goodness, they have been on quite a tear. They've won 11 of their last 15. They have the fifth best expected goals against in the NHL. And that's despite playing without some key defensive pieces as of late in guys like Ryan McDonough, Victor Hedman. So, the Lightning also got dealt another big blow on Saturday. Of course, they lost Braden Point offensively. So, all of that, despite all of that, the Lightning are currently the top team in the Atlantic Division. They've got a 1 point lead over the Red Wings. I mean, Diandra, you cover this team. What is the biggest reason, in your opinion, that this team's been able to win despite all these injury issues?
Yeah, and you can add Eric Chernak to that list as well because he's out on he's on injured reserve. So you can add him to the list. I think that the Lightning have done such a good job, building their organizational depth. Like they have had to rely on players from their AHL team, the Syracuse Crunch, every single night. And it seems like, they'll call these guys up and they're immediately ready to go. They're not just like filling in a piece, like they are actually making a difference. And they've really had to rely on them. Like they're I would say like 2/3 of the team right now is coming from their AHL team. So they've just done a really good job over the years. And I would say like in the past, especially this summer, you can look at two guys that just off the top of my head, Dominic James, who's a center, but also a defenseman, to Stu. They got him, he was playing over in Europe. He was undrafted and they signed him late in the off season. So they're really good at finding guys that maybe no other teams are paying attention to, and then they'll develop them and get them where they need to be. But I think so much of it goes to coaching as well. Like I have watched Coop this year. He's kind of like kicked it up a notch. I think it didn't sit well with them that they were knocked out in the first round the past 3 years. So they've definitely ramped it up this year so far.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, is from more of an outside perspective, I mean, what do you see that the Lightning have been doing so well to be in this position that they're in right now?
Well, being an old street hockey goaltender, and I'm retired from the Western New York Street Hockey League, I'm always looking at goaltending, and we talked about how bad Andrei Vasilevsky was early in the year. He was winless in his first 5 games. Since then, he's been 9-2. And with, the injuries that we just spoke about, you needed Vasilevsky to be at the top of his game or close to it. And it seems that he has been. I mean, the one save that he made in that Edmonton game that went the other way, and then they scored the game winner, was incredible. But to Diandra's point, I mean, I'm looking down their roster and there are players, and I know that the depths of organizations. I didn't know who Charles Edward Doustis is. I mean, Curtis Douglas, I remember him from the Toronto Marlies. He was traded for Connor Timmins. He's a mountain man at 6'9". And he's got 51 penalty minutes in 16 games. So they're getting contributions, as Diandra said, from Syracuse. And unlike some other organizations, they're weathering the injury storm and they're getting victories. And that's what you need to do.
Definitely. And, you brought up goaltending. I think we do have to talk about one goaltender who is maybe not having the best season or best section of his season right now, and that's Sergei Bobrovsky. Of course, they had a Stanley Cup final rematch over the weekend between the Oilers and the Panthers. Oilers put up 6 goals on Bobrovsky. They took a 6-3 win. Bobrovsky right now, it's not just that one game, as I mentioned, he's in the midst of one of the worst statistical seasons of his career right now. So he's carrying an .887 save percentage, 2.8 goals against through 16 games. I mean, Mike, with the Panthers, this is a team that you and I have talked about quite a bit, as it really doesn't matter how they start the season, right? Because as long as they can sneak into the playoffs, they'll be fine. But, looking at the struggles that Bobrovsky's been having, do you think that they should be concerned at all? Or what's the level of concern with this?
Well, the one injury or the one uh, performance that I don't think that they could weather is in goal, because unlike previous years where they had Spencer Knight as the fallback, or Anthony Stolarz when he had that really good year before they won the cup, Daniel Tarasov, I mean, he's actually playing very well. 913 save percentage, has a couple victories, 2.45 goals against. Those are good stats. But they need Bobrovsky to play like Bobrovsky, and he's got a sub 900 save percentage. And with all the injuries that they have, and Tkachuk and Barkov, and one of their defensemen I'm drawing a blank on right now, they need Bobrovsky to play at a high level. Now, they're going to get Tkachuk back in late December. They're not going to get Barkov probably back until the playoffs. So they're going to need him to sort of tune up his game. And, the only thing you have to worry about here, he's 30, he's in his late 30s. There is a certain drop off at a certain point. And if he is dropping off, then the chances of the Florida Panthers making a three-peat are kaput.
Yeah, Diandra, obviously being in Tampa, you've seen the Panthers quite a bit over the years, covering that rivalry with the Lightning. I mean, what would your concern level be for the Panthers if Bobrovsky is just kind of hitting this cliff right now?
Well, I think we can compare it to when the Lightning, won back-to-back cups and then went to the Stanley Cup final. And you can't underestimate what that does to a goalie from a wear and tear perspective. And I remember Andrei Vasilevsky talking about that. It is very difficult to do. So I think probably what we're seeing with Bobrovsky is the effects of going to 3 consecutive Stanley Cup finals more than it is a drop off. Although obviously age is an issue, eventually it catches up with everybody. But I think that that's kind of what we're seeing. And we're seeing it across the board with the Panthers, not just, in net, is that there is a price to pay when you do that. However, I would never count them out of anything. So, we'll see what happens, down the stretch here. But I wouldn't count Bobrovsky out. I think it's just, he's played a lot of hockey the past few years.
Yeah, that's a really good point from a wear and tear standpoint. Going to take a quick break from the goaltending talk, although we are going to get back to it in a moment. But do first want to talk about the Ottawa Senators. They're the top Canadian team in the standings right now. They've managed to play extremely well without their captain, Brady Tkachuk, who actually said on his podcast that he's eyeing a return on around Thanksgiving, as he recovers from his thumb surgery. So, of course, the Senators currently 11-6-4. They've won 5 of their last 8. Mike, seeing what they've done without arguably their best player in Brady Tkachuk, do you think that the Senators still have room to level up and end up being the top Canadian team this season?
It's very possible. I mean, the one concern that you'd have with Tkachuk coming back is a team sometimes will rally around when their star player is not there. And then once that star player gets back, then they sort of say, oh, we can relax now. And that I've seen that happen many a time. I mean, right now, the reason that they're at the level that they are is, Shane Pinto has stepped up and he's got 10 goals right now. And Stützle has been a star like we thought he was going to be. Drake Batherson's having a good year. So everybody has stepped up. And we know Tkachuk wants to get back as soon as possible because he wants to get as many games in before the Olympics, because him and his brother and a number of those Team USA players who are injured, they all want to come back in probably mid to late December to get some games under their belt before going over to Milano Cortina. So I think that's the motivation to get back as soon as possible for Brady Tkachuk. But I think they're going to be one of the top 3 teams in the Atlantic, and I thought that from the very beginning. So what they're doing right now isn't exactly surprising.
Yeah, Deandra, do you agree? I mean, it maybe on the surface a little surprising to think that they've done all this without Kachuk in the lineup, but based on what Mike just said, I mean, it does make sense.
Yeah, I think I expected Ottawa to be like at least a top 3, top 4 team in the division, just based on kind of what we saw at the end of last season and into the playoffs. I think that they kind of like bumped up the physicality, but also when you look at the Atlantic Division this year, I mean, it's pretty wide open. The Toronto's at the bottom right now, and so usually it's like the top 3 teams. It's Florida, Toronto, and Tampa, but right now it's just Tampa. So there's there's room there for them to finish where they'd like to, and I think that that's probably motivation for them as well. It's just they got to push through until Brady Tkachuk gets back, and I'm not surprised. I think that they're definitely gonna, we might see maybe a little stagnant in the middle of the season, but down the stretch, I think that they're gonna be guns a-blazing.
Yeah, the physicality piece was something that maybe, was where they had some room for improvement outside of Kachuk, of course, at the end of last year and into the playoffs. And now it seems like they are kind of collectively picking up the pace and ratcheting up the physicality a little bit there. So definitely good to keep an eye on the Ottawa Senators. All right. I mentioned we would be going back to the goalie talk. So here we are. Mike, the Buffalo Sabres. They placed Alexander Georgiev on waivers. Unconditional waivers with the purpose of contract termination. Of course, he's now the 3rd NHL player to do that in the last month. Of course, we've got David Kampf and Alex Texier as well. So the Sabres, just by way of review, had signed Georgiev to a 1-year, $825,000 contract during training camp. That was after they learned that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was dealing with a long-term injury. Georgiev, meanwhile, was coming off of the worst season of his NHL career. He was hoping that this might be his chance to kind of bounce back with some more consistent reps in net. But since then, as you well know, Mike, the Sabres crease has gotten pretty crowded. Of course, they signed Alex Lyon, they brought in Colton Ellis, and Georgiev's opportunity suddenly was no longer as wide open as it once looked. So rumors are circulating that Georgiev is going to head to the KHL in Russia. But Mike, do you think any NHL teams might take a shot on him before that happens?
I didn't think that once I heard the contract termination that any team would take a shot at him, because he played so horribly down the stretch with Colorado and then was shipped to San Jose basically to clear his salary so Mackenzie Blackwood could go the other way. And it was just reported, and I've been hearing reporting all this morning that he is signing a 2-year deal with Spartak in the KHL. So he likely didn't have any kind of NHL feelers. But the Sabres goaltending situation is just bizarre, because they pick up Colton Ellis, a prospect who was playing in the St. Louis Blues organization. They pick him up off of waivers when they tried to send him down to Springfield. They can't send him down to Rochester because he would have to clear waivers again. So they're keeping 3 goaltenders. They played him 4 of 5. Then they went to Luukkonen, and they've played Alex Lyon very heavily. Devin Levi is like, hey, I'm here, guys. And he's been in Rochester, and I think he's going to stay down in Rochester. And it draws the question of who the goalie of the future here is. Is Luukkonen going to be here long term? Is Ellis the guy that they think is going to be the goalie of the future? I mean, Devin Levi, he's got another year on his contract. Will they trade him? I mean, there's a lot of speculation. And if we look at the goaltending market, there aren't many goaltenders available at the deadline, and there aren't many goaltenders in free agency next July. So I think if a team needs a goaltender, they're going to be calling Kevin Adams or whoever else is the GM.
Well, I think to that end, too, it's good to point out what the goaltending market looks like. I mean, Deandra, if, it looks like that Georgiev is, in fact, headed back to Russia, are you surprised at all that other teams maybe didn't take a shot on him, even though he did have that rough ending to his last season. But, just given that goaltending is such a hot commodity in this league, are you surprised at all?
No, I mean, he was struggling for sure. I didn't, and then once I actually just read that he had signed. So, obviously as he was saying, like, that means that there was no interest. But I think with him, just based on his history, I think if there is any interest, like you said, obviously there's only so many good goalies on the market. Eventually someone's going to need one. So I think if we see any interest, maybe it will be he goes to the KHL, maybe he'll play well there. And then he's going to have to prove himself. And I could see, I mean, there's, like we said, there's like a carousel of good goalies. So I think if he does well in the KHL, that's when we'll see some interest from other teams. Especially when you get to the trade deadline and there's injuries and teams are in a desperate need for a goalie with experience.
Very true. All right. Well, want to switch gears a little bit here. This is a fun one. Fun topic to talk about. Let's talk about what is happening in Calgary right now. So, of course, Flames president, for those who have not heard, Don Maloney had some interesting comments about the state of his team at this point in the season this week. He said, quote, "To me, it's just too early for us to be throwing in the towel. There's never going to be a point where we want to say, let's just get rid of every player that other teams want." Meanwhile, as we all know, the Flames have been one of, if not the worst team in the league up to this point throughout this first part of the season. So, Mike, do you think that this was the right message for Maloney to deliver to Flames fans at this point in time, even though they've gotten off to such a bad start and it kind of seems that they don't really have a shot at crawling out of this hole that they've dug themselves into?
Well, it's weird. He says this after they've won 3 games in a row. I saw them win in Buffalo last Wednesday, and they won a couple games on the weekend, and then he comes out and makes this statement. I mean, I would say to Don Maloney, and I have a lot of respect for him because he's been a long time executive in the league, you read the room. I mean, if you were in the Eastern Conference, you might have a chance. Like Toronto's got 21 points, Buffalo's got 22. The wild card, I believe, is at 25 or 26. So they're 4 points out. Calgary, the only thing keeping them from the bottom of the league is the Nashville Predators. They're at 19 points. They're 8 points out of a wild card. They're 9 points out of third place or 8 points out of the third place in their division. That kind of gap at American Thanksgiving is almost insurmountable. So you're not doing it. And I saw them firsthand. They're not a very deep team. There are some good young players. I think, Parekh is going to be good. They have a couple other, Coronado and Connor Zary are pretty decent. But, the veteran guys like Rasmus Anderson, who's an expiring contract, or Nazem Kadri, if you can get rid of that boat anchor of a deal, you trade those guys and you go for Gavin McKenna. I don't understand the stigma when it comes to some of these managers in the league to tank and go for talent. Look how it turned out for Chicago and San Jose with Bedard and Celebrini.
Yeah, it's a fine line, I think. You don't want to project the message that, hey, we're trying to lose, because that doesn't send a great message to the veterans, especially that you do have on your roster, and it's just not good optics for the fan base. But like you said, Mike, it is about, it gets to a certain point where you can't completely have your head in the sand about it, and you need to read the room a little bit. I mean, Diandra, what are your thoughts on the kind of messaging that Maloney's giving to the Flames fans right now?
I have to say, it reminded me a little bit of what I've heard from Barry Trotz recently. When you talk about the Predators and kind of what they're going through, and it doesn't really pass the eye test, right? You can see what's happening. They've been struggling for multiple seasons now. 2 seasons. This is their second consecutive season, but like Calgary, it's gone on for the past few years. So I think from a fan perspective, like you guys were saying, it's like read the room. It's a little tone deaf here. And I think you don't want to show all your cards right away, right? because you never know what's going on behind the scenes. But I think there's definitely a way to handle it. And sometimes I look at some of these teams that have been either, middle to lower tier for the past 4 or 5 seasons. And you're like, okay, at what point will you make a move? Like, will you make the necessary moves to rebuild your franchise? So Calgary is one of those teams that I look at and I'm like, at some point you got to rebuild. You got to be aggressive and you got to go for it. So I don't know, those comments, I think, from a fan base that has, been through it for a while now, I'm sure it didn't go over very well.
Yeah, I would imagine not. And can confirm the comments from Barry Trotz also not going over very well in Nashville. Of course, Nashville and Calgary, both teams that I think a lot of us expect to be pretty active as sellers at the trade deadline this year. But one team that could have an interesting name on the trade market potentially is the Carolina Hurricanes. I think a lot of us, or at least I won't speak for you all, but for me, I would not have expected to be talking about this at this point in the season. But Elliot Friedman did report on Saturday that after his slow start to the season with Carolina, Andrei Svechnikov would be open to the idea of being traded. So Friedman went on to say that things have cooled off a little bit in that regard as he's been playing more minutes and he's been playing well. But if it gets to a point where he regresses again, goes back to where it was before, then this idea of potentially finding a trade partner could be something to look out for. So, Mike, do you see Svechnikov potentially being traded this season? I mean, even if he was, would the Hurricanes be able to get a good enough return in order to remain competitive without him?
Well, I mean, that's the key, is getting a good enough return. I mean, we've seen what they've tried to do over the last couple of years, going after Gensel, going after Mikko Rantanen, trying to get both of them signed and not being able to. They were able to get Nick Ehlers in free agency. I think the only way they trade Svechnikov is that they get a player who is amenable to signing an extension if he's on a short term with Carolina, or somebody who's locked up long term who can't block a trade. With Carolina, it always seems to be players, some players want to play there, some players don't want to play there, and you're not going to give up a 25-year-old who's got 3 more years left at a reasonable $7.75 million unless you're getting a significant return. And if I look at their roster, and I would think if they're trading him, even though they're trading a forward, I would want to bolster their defense, because I think their defense is nowhere close to what it was a couple years ago when they had Pesce and Shea and Brent Burns. They're not great defensively. They showed that in Buffalo on Sunday, and I think that that would be where they need to go. But I think all this came from when he was playing fourth line. Now he's back up in the top 6, so I think it was a little, maybe something to stir the pot and get him going, and now he's going.
Yeah, I mean, this is a player who obviously former top draft pick for the Canes. He had been, he's a homegrown guy and someone that they have kind of rested a lot of their organizational hopes and dreams on him. And then he's dealt with injuries and whatnot to get to this point. And so it certainly could have been words spoken out of frustration on his part in talking about being open to being traded. But I mean, Diandra, what do you think? Do you think this is just smoke and mirrors, or do you think that there could actually be something to this?
I think for something to get out, I think that is kind of a message that's being sent. But I completely agree. I don't see him going anywhere. I don't see the Canes allowing him to go anywhere, especially when the issue is just kind of lack of minutes. And I think he has like 7 goals so far this season, but 5 of them came in this past month. So once he started to get that ice time again, like you said, they're bumping him up. He's playing a top 6 role now. I think that will kind of ease things over. And like you guys were saying, like we've seen a number of extensions kind of just like fall through with Carolina for whatever reason. Players are either hot or they're cold on signing with them. So I think they're going to do whatever they can to keep him. I don't see him, especially with a homegrown guy. I don't see them letting him go. I just don't.
Well, yeah, definitely could be interesting to keep an eye on though, like we said, or like Elliot said, if he does start to regress, do those rumors start heating up a little bit more. Another report from Elliot Friedman this week that was interesting is that Vancouver, the Canucks, have let it be known that in an effort to get younger, they are willing to listen to offers on quote veteran players. So a little bit of ambiguity as far as who that refers to, what that means, but Friedman did add that Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek reportedly not on the table as potential trade pieces right now. Um, Interesting to say the least, given I don't know, I think Quinn Hughes' future in Vancouver seems maybe tenuous at best at this point, so you would think you might want to try to trade him, but Mike, regardless, who stands out to you in Vancouver as someone who could be on the move if those two guys are off the table?
Yeah, great. Take the guy who everybody wants off the plate and let's trade the crap that's playing badly. Which is just that's typical Jim Rutherford, because I think he's the one sort of running the show here. I mean, the problem is they're blocked by so many no move clauses that most of these players are just laughing and saying, huh, great. You want to trade me? Well, I got a no move clause. So I'm staying where the weather is nice, a place where I want to play. Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, I think Jake DeBrusk has a partial no move, Hronek. I mean, there's been, I think, complete mismanagement on the part of the Vancouver Canucks management. I mean, we shook our heads, Emma, you and I both, when they signed the Thatcher Demko deal. This guy has not been healthy for 3 years, and they signed him to a 3-year extension for more money. And he's, shock, he's out. I mean, they're running into injuries. They're at the bottom of the Western Conference, and now Rutherford and Alvin are trying to stir the pot and get them to play better by threatening to trade. All they're going to trade at the deadline is a player that you know very well, Kiefer Sherwood, who's having a phenomenal year. Maybe they get some sucker to take Evander Kane, but I wouldn't want that guy on my team if all the wingers were off. But they have a few other players that are desirable. But unless you're trading Quinn Hughes, I don't think they're going to make anything major. And what signals does this send to Quinn Hughes about signing with this organization long term? It means see you later.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think, Diandra, we had talked a little bit about this before we recorded the show today, talking about is Quinn Hughes, if it was doubtful that he was going to sign there long term before, it seems like almost a zero chance now.
Yeah, well, I think, saying that, you're not going to trade Quinn Hughes, but okay, he is eligible to sign an extension this upcoming summer. And is he even going to do that given the state of the team and kind of like the message that you're sending of that you're willing to just, trade your veterans, the uncertainty, of that. I mean, is Quinn Hughes even willing to stay there? That's great. You're not going to trade him, but does he want to stay? Is kind of the more important question here. So I don't know. A lot of uncertainty. Vancouver's another one of those teams where you watch, like we were talking about with Calgary, and you're like, at what point do you make the right moves to improve your organization? They're one of those teams for sure.
Yeah, well, like Mike said, I mean, you've got Pettersson's probably not going anywhere. Besser's not going anywhere. If Hronek and Hughes are not going anywhere, then, I mean, if you're the front office, you can probably say as much as you want about we're open to trading players, but the players might not be tradable. So will be interesting to see what happens. But like you said, Mike, I would keep an eye on Kiefer Sherwood, very valuable player, especially for a playoff contender, exactly the kind of physical guy with a scoring touch that teams could be looking for.
I'll just say this, because March the 6th is the trade deadline, and we know a lot of teams out there are going to be looking to shake things up. Then don't give these players no move clauses. You had, in Toronto, it was like, well, we're going to trade Morgan Riley. He's got a no move clause. He doesn't want to go anywhere. So he's not going anywhere. You can put all the pressure on him in through the media or whatever. It doesn't work. They're agents, and they take a hard stance and say, I signed here. I want to be here. I'm not going anywhere. And the same thing is in Vancouver, and the same thing is in Nashville with guys like Stamkos and Marchessault. If they want to go someplace, then they'll say, okay, I'm open to being traded, and they will allow Nashville or Vancouver or Toronto to shop them around. But they're in the end going to have control over the situation, and a general manager floating it out there that they're talking about trading veteran players, that doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore.
I think you can also add too, like some of these contracts and the numbers, like teams are not willing to take on some of these contracts as well, especially with the veteran players. So, I mean, that's a whole other piece, is like, even if you're willing to trade some of these veteran guys, if the contract is hefty and doesn't work, you're not going to get offers whether they like the player or not. It's just, that's such a big piece to it.
Or you end up like a situation with a player that Diandra would know well, Ryan McDonough. He gets shipped to Nashville and then ends up requesting to go back to Tampa once they have the cap space to fit him in. So definitely not easy, these delicate situations with these no move clauses, of course. So, of course, if you want to read any more about the Vancouver Canucks, what they are dealing with their roster situation, or the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Buffalo Sabres, any of the rest of the teams that we talked about today in the NHL, please head over to the Hockey News. Again, the Hockey News has been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start, is a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and grab your subscription today. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in and joined us today to talk a little bit of hockey. We do appreciate it. We will be back with an all-new episode on Thursday, American Thanksgiving, so make sure to come back and join us. For Michael Augello and Diandra Loux, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.